The studio lights were hotter than usual that Tuesday evening in March 2025, casting a sharp, unforgiving glow across the familiar walls of Dan Bongino's home studio, the same controlled space where he had recorded thousands of hours of unfiltered commentary. Yet on this night, everything felt subtly but unmistakably different, as if the air itself carried a warning that once certain words were spoken, there would be no way to take them back. Bongino sat behind the microphone, shoulders squared, jaw tight, eyes lingering for a moment on the plain manila folder resting on the desk in front of him, a folder that looked unremarkable but carried years of accumulated observations, conversations, impressions, and quiet alarms about a man who had just become the most powerful law enforcement official in the United States. And when his producer's voice crackled through the headphones, "We're living 30 seconds, Dan," he nodded once, not trusting himself to speak, because he knew that tonight he was about to say something that would make him a target all over again, not just to critics or commentators, but to institutions that did not forgive betrayal from within. Kash Patel, newly confirmed FBI director, was dominating headlines, hailed in conservative circles as a long-overdue reformer, and viewed in liberal media as an existential threat to institutional norms. Yet Bongino knew something neither side was fully grappling with, something he had learned years earlier from the inside, from conversations that never made it into official records. And when the red light went on, and he opened with his usual greeting, his New York accent cutting cleanly through the digital airwaves, listeners across the country sensed the tonal shift immediately. Because this was not a rant about policy or a familiar attack on political hypocrisy. This was personal, deliberate, and heavy with consequence. He told them he was going to talk about the new FBI director, and that what he was about to say would make a lot of people very uncomfortable. And as hundreds of thousands leaned closer to their screens and speakers, Bongino explained that he had known Patel far longer than most people realized, and that Patel was either going to transform the FBI completely or be destroyed by the system that surrounded it. With no middle ground, a statement that detonated across social media within minutes, as clips were shared, headlines formed, and speculation erupted. Yet to understand the weight of what Bongino was warning about, one had to go back 7 years earlier to a secure facility in Washington, D.C., where a former Secret Service agent, disillusioned by what he saw as the politicization of law enforcement, and a young Justice Department attorney with a reputation for aggression and independence, first crossed paths at a private security conference restricted to current and former federal officials. In 2018, Bongino was already out of federal service, burned out but not disengaged, building his media platform while still maintaining deep ties inside the national security world. And Patel stood out immediately, not like the cautious stodgy bureaucrats around him, but sharp, direct, openly skeptical of intelligence. Community narratives, willing to talk candidly about FISA abuses, weaponized surveillance, and what both men privately referred to as the deep state, the network of self-preserving power that everyone whispered about, and almost no one challenged publicly. And as they spoke late into the evening, Patel leaned in and told Bongino that everyone inside knew the system was broken, but no one had the courage to say it out loud because they were protecting pensions, reputations, and future book deals. A statement that made Bongino wonder whether Patel was reckless or genuinely brave, or perhaps both. They stayed in touch after that night through encrypted messages and short phone calls, Patel occasionally sharing details about internal resistance and stalled investigations, Bongino carefully using what he could without exposing his source, watching as Patel rose from congressional investigator to National Security Council official, and eventually into the inner circle of Donald Trump. Yet over time, Bongino noticed a change in Patel's tone, a hardening, a shift from idealistic reformer to someone who understood that reform might require destruction first, that the FBI itself was the keystone, as Patel put it during a late negative 2024 call, telling Bongino that if the Bureau could be fixed, everything else would follow, but also warning him that the system would not allow it to happen quietly, that leaks, smears, and worse would come fast and hard. And when Bongino asked why he would take such a job knowing the risks, Patel replied simply that somebody had to, and that he would rather die trying than live knowing he hadn't. Words that lingered long after the call ended. Now, in March 2025, Patel was FBI director, having survived a brutal confirmation process by the narrowest of margins, and within days he had begun demanding access to Epstein files, ordering reviews of the 6th of January investigations, and pulling agents from cases he believed were politically motivated, triggering panic among entrenched interests. Panic that Bongino recognized instantly as dangerous, because in his experience institutional panic always led to retaliation, and that was why he opened the manila folder on his desk mid-broadcast, revealing that inside were not classified documents or illegal leaks, but years of notes, fragments of texts, and recollections that painted a picture the mainstream media refused to acknowledge, including Patel's claim 2 years earlier, that when, not if, he became FBI director, the first thing he would do was determine who had buried Epstein's client list and why no one had been arrested, a statement that caused the studio phone lines to light up simultaneously, as Bongino continued, explaining that Patel had warned him about senior FBI figures actively blocking investigations into powerful individuals, not because of evidence gaps or legal barriers, but because those targets possessed the kind of influence that could end careers or worse. And as Bongino paused, his Secret Service instincts flared, warning him he was crossing a line that powerful people did not want crossed. Yet he pressed on, telling his audience that the same people who weaponized the intelligence community, promoted the Russia collusion narrative, and targeted political enemies were still in positions of power and were terrified of Patel. Not because he was partisan, but because he believed in accountability. In real time, the episode exploded in downloads while Bongino noticed coordinated warning signs, his website slowing under what appeared to be a denial of service attack platforms flagging content, and his secure phone buzzing with a call from FBI headquarters that he deliberately ignored, choosing instead to warn openly that Patel was walking into a building full of people who wanted him to fail, some who would leak, some who would sabotage, and some who might do worse, an implication so stark it left little doubt that Bongino believed Patel could be in physical danger from elements within his own agency. Within 48 hours, the backlash proved his point, as the FBI deputy director held an emergency press briefing to dismiss Bongino's claims as dangerous conspiracy theories. The DOJ quietly opened a preliminary inquiry into whether he had disclosed classified information, led by a career prosecutor known for targeting Trump-era figures. And 2 unidentified men claiming to be FBI agents appeared at Bongino's Florida home without credentials, captured on security cameras, leaving only after being denied entry, a message delivered without words. Yet that same night Bongino received another call. This one he answered, recognizing Patel's calm voice immediately as the director asked to speak securely, a meeting that Bongino would never describe, but whose consequences were unmistakable when he returned to the microphone the next evening, and stated clearly that everything he had said stood, that he stood with Kash Patel, 100%, a declaration that placed him firmly in Patel's camp and instantly made him a target from all sides, with liberal media questioning his motives, some conservatives accusing him of becoming a mouthpiece, and anonymous intelligence sources reviving the familiar tactic of labeling dissent as foreign disinformation. A playbook Bongino had seen too many times to be shaken by. What did unsettle him was a later conversation with a former Secret Service colleague, who explained quietly over coffee that the fear surrounding Patel had nothing to do with partisanship and everything to do with effectiveness. That Patel threatened decades-old programs, relationships, and networks of power, and when Bongino asked directly whether Patel was in danger, the silence that followed answered the question more clearly than words ever could. Faced with a choice between retreat and escalation, Bongino chose the latter, deciding that the oath he once took did not expire with his badge, and that Patel, whether he knew it or not, needed someone outside the system watching closely, documenting every move, every leak, every attempt at intimidation, because truth exposed in daylight was the one thing entrenched power feared most. And as the studio lights dimmed after another broadcast and Bongino sat alone, the folder still open with stories yet untold, he understood that each episode would bring new risks. But he had long since stopped fearing personal consequences, having learned during his years in federal service that the most dangerous thing you can do to a corrupt system is refuse to be silent. And somewhere in Washington, Kash Patel was walking the halls of the Hoover Building making enemies with every honest decision, while Dan Bongino remained behind a microphone ensuring that if anything happened, the world would know exactly where to look, leaving only one unresolved question hanging in the air. whether a single voice telling the truth could be enough to protect a man who dared to challenge the machinery of power.